6 million years ago, Earth was wild, unpredictable, and untamed. Forests stretched across much of Africa, teeming with life. But these forests were changing. The climate was shifting, and with that change, a new journey began. Not for all creatures, but for a few that would one day become us, in the heart of East Africa. Something subtle happened, not overnight, not even within a lifetime, but over thousands of generations. A quiet transformation was underway. One of our earliest ancestors may have taken the first step on 2 feet at the time. The world was dominated by 4-legged life. Apes climbed trees. Predators stalked the undergrowth. Early hominins, those first forms of pre-human primates, were still mostly arboreal. They survived by climbing, grasping, escaping into the canopy. But in some regions, forests began to thin. Savannas expanded, and those who adapted survived. Among those early creatures, one stands out in the fossil record: Sahelanthropus tcha. It lived around 6 to 7 million years ago. Its skull was small, its brain no larger than a modern chimp's, but the placement of its foramen magnum, the hole where the spine connects to the skull, was lower. That suggests an upright posture. This small anatomical shift marked a massive evolutionary turn. Why walk on 2 legs? The answer isn't simple. Bipedalism didn't make them faster. It didn't make them stronger, but it made them efficient. Standing on 2 legs freed the hands. It offered better visibility across open terrain. It allowed for carrying food, infants, or even tools in the future. And most importantly, it conserved energy over long distances. Walking upright used less effort than moving on 4 limbs. That meant more ground could be covered, more resources could be found. And when food became scarce, movement was survival. But walking came with risk. Bipedal creatures were slower to escape. Danger, they were more visible to predators. Injury to a leg could be fatal. Yet the trade-offs were worth it. The anatomy of these early walkers began to change. Pelvis shapes adjusted for balance. Spines curved to support upright posture. Feet slowly evolved from grasping digits to arched platforms built for stride. The change was not immediate. It was gradual, inconsistent, and imperfect. Some individuals likely walked part of the time. Others still relied on climbing, but over millennia. The direction was clear. With this change came a shift in behavior. Bipedal. Hominins could travel farther from trees in search of food. They could carry more back to a safe place, and carrying. Infants needed to be held and protected for longer periods. This increased social bonds. The more they relied on one another, the more cooperation mattered. Early forms of empathy and social memory may have emerged in this context from intelligence, but from necessity. Caring meant survival. Standing up also changed how these early humans saw their world from a low vantage point in the grass. Danger was hidden, but rising above the undergrowth offered a new view. They could spot predators before it was too late. They could follow herds or see storms coming from far away. Vision became a new weapon, one shaped not by claws or teeth. By perspective, it is likely that standing, walking, and seeing farther helped, fueled the development of new instincts. More decisions had to be made on the ground. More awareness was required. More memory. More caution. And these pressures, though subtle, favored minds that could anticipate at first. Nothing would have seemed revolutionary to an observer 6 million years ago. These creatures were just another part of the landscape. They didn't speak. They didn't make tools. They didn't build, but inside their bones, evolution was at work. Tiny changes reinforced over generations, shaping something entirely new. A species learning to walk was not just learning to move differently. It was becoming different. The journey was filled with setbacks. Many early hominins didn't survive. Species came and vanished. The path was not straight. It was a tangled web of trial, failure, and adaptation. But bipedalism endured, And from that endurance came possibility. With hands now free, they could eventually grasp, shape, and create. With a new way of moving, they could explore further than before, and with deeper bonds. They could start to form the first primitive societies. What began as a change in posture would one day lead to fire, shelter, tools, and thought 6 million years ago. No one knew what this change would bring. The first step was not taken with purpose. It was not planned or chosen, but it was the start of something monumental. They were not human, not yet, but they were becoming something new. The earth did not change. To suit them, they changed to survive it, and in doing so, they laid the foundation for everything that would follow. As bipedalism took root, hominins began to reshape not only their bodies but their behavior. They could now move across greater distances in shorter time. This brought them into new landscapes, new climates, and new challenges. Where trees once offered safety, savanna demanded awareness. Where canopy once shielded them, the open plains exposed them now. Survival depended on something more than instinct. It depended on learning. These ancient primates began to rely more on observation. Who traveled where? Where could food be found? What paths were dangerous? Over time, pattern recognition became critical. Those who could remember where predators roamed, or where fruit ripened survived. Those who couldn't, didn't. This shift gave rise to another transformation, the beginnings of memory-driven, decision-making. It wasn't intelligence in the modern sense, but it was progress. With better awareness came better choices. They began to time their movements with the cycles of the land. They found shelter near water. They avoided open spaces during the hottest hours. They didn't control the world, but they were starting to adapt to it more actively. And from that adaptation came something even more powerful: connection in groups. They found strength. One pair of eyes became many. One alert call could warn everyone. Social bonds deepened. Simple gestures, touch, gaze, sound became tools of communication, not language. Not yet, but the first layers of understanding. A mother warning her child, male defending his group, an elder guiding the young. Cooperation made survival more likely, and those who cooperated passed their ways down across generations. This sharing of behavior created the first glimmers of what we now call culture. Meanwhile, physical evolution continued. The pelvis shortened and widened to support upright posture. The spine became more shaped for balance. The legs lengthened, feet flattened, and gained arches to absorb shock with every step. These changes weren't drastic in one generation, but over tens of thousands of years, they became defining traits. It was not one species, it was many. A line of branching, competing. Hominins, some walking, some climbing, some doing both. Only a few left traces behind. Most vanished without record, but each one added something to the story. Among the key transitional species was Rhineteuganensis dating to around 6 million years ago. Its femur bone suggests upright walking, yet it still retained climbing traits. This hybrid form reflects the in-between world these creatures lived in. They had not abandoned the trees completely, but they no longer belonged to them either. They were explorers of two worlds, one above, one below, and slowly, the world below began to dominate. Ground-based movement allowed for new opportunities, from scavenging large carcasses to eventually hunting small prey, and with movement across wider terrain came the chance to discover fire, not yet to create it but to encounter it. Natural fires sparked by lightning must have lit up the African landscape, terrifying at first, no doubt, but also mesmerizing and useful. Early hominins may have followed burned areas, scavenging the remains of animals caught in the flames. Cooked meat was easier to chew and digest. It unlocked more nutrients, and that energy fueled the brain, even without controlling fire. The advantage of walking brought them into contact with it, and contact eventually led to curiosity. By now, standing upright had changed everything. It altered the spine, The skull, the hips, the feet. It reshaped social life, parenting and foraging. It even influenced childbirth, with changes to the pelvis and larger brain. Offspring, birth became more difficult. Infants were born earlier, more helpless. Requiring longer care, that care deepened group dependence, and dependence required communication. Standing up didn't just change the way they moved, changed the way they lived. Still, danger was everywhere. Big cats stalked the grasslands, snakes hid in crevices, and droughts could erase food sources. Overnight, but walking gave them reach. They could migrate when needed. They could follow herds. They could endure. This endurance, more than strength or speed, became their greatest asset. And in time, it would become humanity's too. Eventually, some of these early hominins would vanish. Others would evolve into new forms. Australopithecus, afferences would appear. Then Homo habilis, the handyman. Then Homo erectus, the long-distance walker, and first, true traveler of continents. But it all began with the first step. The first time a creature stood up and saw the horizon not as a wall, but as a path. That moment didn't echo across time. There was no audience, no victory, just quiet determination. One step, then another. 6 million years ago, no one could have imagined what would follow. But those steps, those small acts of balance and motion, they changed the course of life on Earth because of them. We would one day build cities, create music, launch into space. But none of that could happen till we learned to walk. And before we walked, we stood. Not to dominate, but to endure. And that endurance became the legacy we all carry.